And now, back to the man who's never afraid to throw virtual hands, the social media samurai, the tyrant of Twitter, the keyboard snatcher of souls, Tim Graham and friends.
Who's in the NFL here? You? You? How about you, Tim? You, Tim.
It's Tim Graham and friends. I almost said it. All right. 3, 2, and it's Tim Graham and friends. And I still am in my undisclosed location. Jonah Bronstein, he though looks like he is the one coming to us from a bunker today with the backdrop you have behind us, some scaffolding, some wiring. Looks like could be a warehouse, could be, I don't know. Do you want to reveal
Really, I
where
just
you're
turned the
coming
camera around. This is the other side of my apartment. The tree is over there. The books.
Jonah's coming to us from the Buffalo Bills media workroom, and from what I understand, he is not alone. I don't know that if that is going to require him to pull punches because of the other people who are there in the media room with him. They cannot hear me, so they can only hear Jonah's reply. So I could really talk some smack. Do you want to give us a roll call as to who's there?
We have Dom Tibbetts from WKBW Channel 7, Catherine Fitzgerald from the Buffalo Evening News, Elena Getzenberg from Entertainment Sports Programming Network, and that's it. And myself from Bronstein Enterprises.
Okay. Bronstein Sports Plus is now out. It's Bronstein Sports Enterprises. It's been rebranded yet again. Maybe that will be the new sponsor of Tim Graham and friends. Hey, by the way, I have to say, I want to thank everybody out there for rating, liking, subscribing, commenting, because we have gotten a massive influx of folks who have been doing that for us, and we are extremely grateful. Our iTunes rating is a 4.8 with 90 plus comments. I didn't realize that was how good that was until I was talking with a consultant a few days ago. I thought that was kind of minor league, but I guess getting 90 people to rate your podcast is significant in and of itself. And then the fact that we're a 4.8 on iTunes, I'm told is great. And so I figure, hey, if we're doing well and we haven't really tried, let's actually try. Let's see how good we can make it. So if you are listening to Tim Graham and friends on whatever platform you're on, or watching it on YouTube, please subscribe or follow, depending on what the platform likes to call it, where you click on it and you get notified as soon as the podcast is live, and then rate it. Some places it's just a like button, thumbs up. Some places it's a 5-star review system, and some places allow you to comment. So wherever you are listening, please do that, because it really helps us out in what we are trying to do. And we do have plans for the future, maybe doing some new things, and some things that Jonah and I are kind of excited about. But if you could do that, it really helps us with our foundation when we go to sponsors, when we go to places, locations, maybe podcasting here or there, taking the podcast on the road, and to show, hey, this is the kind of audience we have. And it has been an incredibly loyal audience. And we're thankful for you. Running into folks out in public. I had someone stop me at the mall when I was doing my Christmas shopping to ask me if I was Tim Graham. And usually when that happens, it's somebody I know screwing with me, because it was from behind. It's like, hey, are you Tim Graham? And I turn around and it's Josh Reed or, Matthew Fairburn or somebody like that with a disguised voice. But this was an actual listener who stopped, and we chatted for 15 minutes about the podcast and what's going on in Buffalo sports journalism. Rad Man, by the way, the real Rad Man. If you follow him on Twitter, he's out there.
4.8 out of 5, right? That's not out of 10.
Oh, I got to double check that. I assumed it was out of 5. I did notice, though, we do have a couple ones, but I couldn't find out. I wanted to see what the ones had to say. in the grant. So, but we've had so many fives and
They
fours that they got the ones have been kind of washed out.
maybe they're confused. I used to work basketball camps, and we have to give these report cards to the young campers, and you're encouraged to give very favorable grades, and it's usually 1 out of 5, and it's give them a lot of fives, but there's always a coach every year that doesn't quite understand that and thinks 1 is the best grade, so they'll give this kid all ones for everything they do, and then they come back in tears wondering why they failed basketball camp at 6 years old.
I didn't even get a ribbon.
I do know that we really appreciate it and covet these 5-star ratings, but I do have to emphasize that 4 is my favorite number, and
Hey, don't. All right. So if you're listening to this, don't, as a joke, give us a 4 because Jonah just said that. Please, we'll take the 5. Now, if you think we deserve a 4, give us a 4. But if Jonah's, fiddle fucking around here and gets people like the idea when Josh Allen's grandma died to make a $17 donation instead of a $20 donation, we'll take the 20. We don't have to have it match up with Jonah's jersey number.
4 would be good if this was like college. 4.8 is about more than double my college GPA.
Yeah, well, that stands to reason. Hey, the Bills have a playoff game this weekend, the Jacksonville Jaguars, but also the Sabres are playing so well. I'm gonna let you decide where we start, Jonah. Do you want to start with the Sabres or do you want to dig into the Bills matchup with the Jacksonville Jaguars 1 p.m. Sunday?
Our listeners would probably rather hear us get to the Bills analysis as quick as we can, but I will say the Sabres have played the most recent game and will be playing the next game before the Bills play again on Sunday. So timeliness would favor the Sabres.
Okay. And you know what? People have been talking about the Bills all week. We do have some thoughts. And really, what I want to get into, Jonah, with you is kind of a phenomenon more so than the matchup. It's the Sean McDermott is out if he loses this game. Distant drumbeat, as I've been calling it, from the national media. I have some thoughts on that from the national media, about the national media, about the pundits who are actually saying these things, the type of people who are reporting this or proposing that it be true. It is pretty incredible. And I think it's an interesting look at sports journalism. But also, there's a real discussion to be had about Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane and Josh Allen. The three of them have never won a road playoff game, and now the Bills have to win 3 straight if they want to get into the Super Bowl. And they are, although they're favored by 1.5 Sunday at Jacksonville, the Jags have won 8 in a row. Trevor Lawrence is playing really well. I am picking the Bills to lose on Sunday on the Buffalo Kickoff Live show. Spoiler alert. And I believe I'm the only one on the crew that's doing so. I don't know if I just did a really big bad thing by tipping our hand or giving the spoiler alert, but you can check out the scores and keys to the game and all that stuff. But yeah, I think I'm alone in picking the Jaguars to win the game, which I think somebody should. 1.5 point spread means it's going to be a close game. You can't have 6 guys all thinking the Bills are just going to win the game, and cover, no less. All right, so Jonah, let's start with. We'll get into all that. Mostly my thoughts on McDermott, I think, is really what I'm most interested in talking about. And then we can get into matchup stuff too regarding the Jags, but the Sabres. They win last night quite easily against the New York Rangers. Colton Ellis, the guy that you do worry about, I guess, as goaltender the most, he goes in there and the Sabres get him a nice lead. And although he let in a bad goal, I think that was in the second period. But anyway, the Sabres just are a different class of team now. They can survive hey, Colton, get in there and we got you. That's not something that they've always been able to say in this season.
Yeah, the way they responded to the pushback from the Rangers when the Rangers got the goal that cut it to 3-2 and on the road in MSG, it felt like the Sabres of just a month ago would have withered in that. And same thing happened against the Canucks the other night when it got to 4-3 after the Sabres had a 4-0 lead. And you would have thought, this is another reprise of the way the Sabres have lost so many games over the last 15 seasons, but they pulled that one out. Matthias Samuelsson, a defenseman who barely scored any goals before this season, has discovered an offensive game. He gets a shorthanded goal, stealing the puck, practically a breakaway goal, a play you never thought he could make, and now he's making it, and it's becoming less surprising because he's made a few of these offensive type plays before. Colton Ellis, the third goalie, who has been good earlier in the season, but hadn't been so good in his last couple starts, coming off not playing in a month. He makes 30 saves. He has a very good game. And I think the top line is what the Sabres have done over the past month. They've won 12 of the past 13 games. They haven't done that since the 05-06 season, which is, a memorable season that they're going to acknowledge with a reunion game coming up next week. Coming now into a 5-game homestand. They've won 8 road games over the past month. That's the most in the NHL at that time. Before that stretch started, they were the worst road team in the league. Now they're, recently the best road team in the league. It's really turned into an entirely different narrative about the Sabres in just 4 or 5 weeks' time.
Yeah, 12 out of 13, you mentioned it there, Jonah, and they're not just squeaking by. Only 3 of those games needed to go beyond regulation. They won at Edmonton in overtime to start the streak. They beat the Islanders in a shootout, and then at the Senators right before Christmas, that was an overtime game. Everything else has been by 2-3 goals. And comfortably, as though they don't seem to be working with a razor thin margin of error, like when they went on the long streak years ago, the 10-game streak that was then followed by a long losing streak. This is a team that seems to be in control. They're keeping it between the lines. They're not swerving. They're not going onto the shoulder at all. Now, again, I think it's still early, and you hate to say it because 13 games is quite a sample size. But they have been so inconsistent prior to the Kevyn Adams firing. And I don't believe, and we talked about it last week on the podcast and with Joe Lazito about how the absence of Kevyn Adams has been a positive in terms of a freeing concept of lifting of the cloud, the fog that has been around the organization for a while, maybe letting the players come to work feeling like we do have people with real credentials in place that can get us where we need to go. If things do enter some turbulence, if we do end up in the ditch, we can drive it back out of the ditch with Jarmo Kekalainen, whereas Kevyn Adams didn't inspire that kind of hope. So I'm not saying that it's all fixed. I can't get there quite yet, only because I think it's been so many years, and even just this season of the maddening inconsistency. So I think that me as an observer, and probably lends itself to how Sabres fans are feeling also, is just like, what's waiting around the corner? What is, the Alex Lyon injury? Oh, no. Well, there seem to be kind of dealing with that. Okay. Let's see how they do it for a prolonged period of time. But anyways, I guess I'm kind of giving that notion, that feeling that I have back to you, Jonah, to say, am I being a little hard on them? Or do you think that that's it's legitimate? If it is, it's justified to still be hesitant to say that they've got it all fixed? Or do you think that they do look like they're closer to some sort of solutions being found and exercised?
Well, it's only been really this 13 games. Well, no, they were playing somewhat
13 games
well
is a
before
lot of
that,
games, but in the Sabres history, 13 games of success is never enough. So I think that's what I'm getting at, just to put everything that word salad into one container. It's 13 games is great. 12 out of 13 is amazing. And in most cases, you'd be like, this is a good team. But we've been inundated with so much mediocrity at best, pathetic play at worst, that I think that even the 13 games doesn't feel like enough yet.
Well, I think it's 18 of the last 24 that they've won. And they had that stretch right before that where they lost in overtime for about 3 games in a row. And, those are loser points, but that was something that this team struggled to do for a long time, to kind of get those points out of nights when you weren't playing your best hockey. And I had done the math on this when it was coming into the end of the calendar year. The Sabres won more games in calendar year 2025 than they lost. So they finished last year playing pretty good hockey, even though they ruined their season with that 13-game winless streak. So this is a stretch that goes back a lot further than 13 games with them playing like a competent playoff contending NHL team. Now, being the very confident team that won on the road against the Dallas Stars on New Year's Eve and uh, beat the Rangers the way they did last night, that's a bit new. And I don't think you can say that they're going to be that team every night and they're going to, make a run to the Stanley Cup Finals and be guaranteed of a playoff spot. But I do think you have to give them credit for the better part of a year now being an above 500 team that is in the playoff mix and consistently playing at least the right way and playing Lindy Ruff's way and being capable of winning night after night. Early in the season they couldn't win on the road, and that was a disturbing trend, but they've righted that ship, and the consistency they've had within this winning streak with different goaltenders in the net, with defensemen out of the lineup. Connor Timmins has been hurt this entire time. Uh, Michael Kesselring's been in and out of the lineup. He's out again. Those were defensemen that they brought in the offseason that were supposed to solve a lot of their problems. Now, without getting a whole lot out of those guys, they still have figured out they've been very consistent in only allowing about 2 goals per game. The game they lost, they gave up 5, but in the games that they've won, it's really been 2 or less goals almost every night. And that's up and down the lineup. I think the forwards are playing better defense and smarter and not turning the puck over the same way that they had before. And so, yeah, I think maybe you're being a little hard on them if you think the other shoe's definitely going to drop, because I think we have longer than a 13-game sample to say this is at least a competent team that can win each and every night, even if they don't always win.
No, I don't think the shoe's definitely going to drop. But I'm still feeling cynical, and I don't want to feel cynical because it is such a feel-good story. I want to be pulled out of my cynicism. Um, I root for Lindy Ruff, the greatest coach to never win a Stanley Cup, a guy that I covered for so many years, a guy that I respect, a guy who I think does all the right things for all the right reasons, has never brought embarrassment or disrepute on anybody he's been around or played with or coached or worked for, all that stuff. Like, he is just a good dude. And plus I want the Sabres to be good for the mental health of the local sports fans. Again, I'm not a Sabres fan per se, but people who I love and care for want to see the Sabres win. My son is about to turn 20, and he's a Sabres fan. He's got the jerseys, he's got stuff hanging on his bedroom wall, and he's collected the cards as a kid, and he's got all that stuff. He watches the games. I think even if he's doing something else, or unless he's at work. But even if he's doing something else, he's got the game on at all times. I mean, even during the darkest periods of the drought. So I want people to be happy, but I guess maybe that's just me. And that's where I was kind of asking you to be a little bit of my sports shrink to see if my cynicism maybe I'm being a little too hard on that, or leaning into my cynicism too much as opposed to enjoying it for what it is, because I want to be able to enjoy it. We would talk about it. We didn't have a podcast at the time, but we were friends and we would talk about it. Going back to the Fitzmagic era of the Bills, I remember telling Bills fans who were just upset that, hey, we're no good. We're never going to beat the Belichick and the Patriots, and this team isn't good enough to be a playoff team. And I would say, yeah, you're right. They're probably not going to the playoffs this year, but they're fun. They're entertaining. Enjoy it. Stevie Johnston, even all Fred Jackson and Kyle Williams and all these guys, these tryhards, these rejects from other teams, Scott Chandler, David Nelson, Naaman Roosevelt, Donald Jones. There were just so many these guys just are easy to root for, and they're underdogs, and they've been told they can't play by 3 or 4 different organizations, and here they are putting up 30 points a game and having a blast. But I think so. I guess I shouldn't make playoffs the standard in terms of really jumping in with both feet. So I'm glad you helped me talk my way through it, Jonah. I think that this is turning into a fun team. And I really don't see, I mean, let me ask you this. Are there things they still need to work through their identity to move on from, to really make even the most cynical fan um, jump in?
I think they have to make the playoffs and clinch the playoffs to bring the most cynical fan back because, they are in this longest playoff drought
But
in
anything
NHL
in terms of the
history.
way they play, the way they, even the three goal, all the things that would drive you nuts as a Sabres fan is kind of cleared up right now because they do need the second goaltender with Lyon being hurt. Right. However, I just phrase that. They need the third goaltender to be up there as the backup with, they don't have to worry about the 3-man rotation. But anyways, all the people who are on the roster are on the roster, right? I mean, there's no frustration about somebody being stuck down in Rochester who should be up, or somebody's getting too many minutes, you got to get so-and-so out of the lineup. Those kind of have evaporated.
The I think there's a segment of the fan base that has some complaints about who's playing on the top line and the usage of certain players, but with the way they've produced over the last 13 games, uh, I don't know why you'd make any change in that. And yeah, there's probably some, Noah Oslin's now down on the fourth line, and if they get a little bit healthier, he could be sent down to Rochester, and there might be some cynical opinions about that. But,
The
how
power
cynical can you
play
be
is
about a team that
is
wins?
okay.
Yeah, Owen
People
Power's
aren't.
not playing that well, and some fans want to see him traded, but he's about the only player that I think fans are being critical of and looking to trade away right now.
Yeah. It's quite a turnaround, and just in a couple of weeks, it's amazing. It's how this can change. Anything else Sabres related you want to go in on, Jonah, before we talk Bills?
That's about it. And I think I mentioned that, they're coming up now on a 5-game homestand, even though this is Bills playoff time. There's that old trope about, the Sabre season doesn't start until the Bills season ends, and Bills seasons go later and later now, and Bills could be playing for a few more weeks. But the Sabres are in a real season now, and if you're waiting to get behind them, I wouldn't wait much longer. They're not selling out every game now, but the crowds are ticking up, and that could turn into a pretty hot ticket soon. And the 05-06 reunion game. You going to come for that and catch up with some of your old friends next Thursday night?
I don't believe so. If the Bills get eliminated on Sunday, maybe. But I think I'll be focusing on probably Bills Broncos in the second round.
Well, how about this? How about the prospect of the Bills and Sabres being in the playoffs in the same season for the first time this century? And I think if you throw the Bandits into that, you might have to go back another 30 years before all of Buffalo's teams were uh, playing in the playoffs. I mean, the Bills aren't given any home playoff games this year, but since we had playoff games in all three sports in Buffalo, you have to go back to the early 90s.
Well, another interesting part of this homestand that's coming up here. They play Anaheim, Florida, Philadelphia, Montreal, and then Minnesota. That Minnesota game is on Sunday, the 17th. Or excuse me, Saturday, the 17th. The Bills could be playing on that day. You could have Bills and Sabres playing simultaneously, based on the
And
way
maybe,
the schedule
to
could
your
shape
point
up.
earlier about cynicism, I don't know if this is a cynical take, but as well as the Sabres are, they're barely in a playoff position. As well as the Sabres are playing, they're barely in a playoff position right now. And if you look at the prediction models, New York Times, Money Puck, whatever, it's still about a 50-50 shot that they're going to make the playoffs. And that's kind of remarkable for a team that's won 12 of the past 13 games. And so if the Sabres do slip, if they get some injuries or they go through a funk, as much as they've maybe righted the ship and are playing better and fix some of the culture, there's no guarantee that they are actually going to break this playoff drought this season.
I wonder, though, how much of those algorithms really factor in how the team is playing recently. And they might, and they probably do in some way. But those algorithms also have to take into account 3 months ago when they were playing like shit. So that's baked into the algorithm of, well, they're going to regress and they're going to, overall they are about a 500 team. Therefore, if they finish 500 down, over the rest of their games, that makes it close. So if they're trending, if they even stay tepid, they probably don't even need to be warm, but if they stay tepid and don't just get cold, the Sabres I think, look like a playoff team to me with the way they're playing.
Yeah. And the
Again, we
Sabres,
mentioned it earlier, or
yeah.
I mentioned it earlier. They're winning these games by 2 and 3 goals. They're not just edging out. They're not just barely. They're not pulling them out of their ass. They're winning these games, and they're scoring first and holding on.
Those analytics or the algorithms are based a lot on the underlying analytics and goal differential and things like that at 5-on-5. And when the Sabres were losing games, they were more middle of the pack in those numbers. And now that they're winning a lot of games, I think they're better analytically, but they're still, closer to the middle of the pack in the math of it all. And I think that's why. And it's also a function of the Eastern Conference and how tight that race is. The Sabres are 11th in the NHL in points. So if if it was a different playoff structure, they would maybe be guaranteed of making it into the playoffs. Or if the East was as weak as the West in certain ways, but the way it is, there's going to be playoff caliber teams in the Eastern Conference that don't make the playoffs, and the Sabres might be that team.
Yeah, it's going to make it for a great second half of the Sabre season in terms of interest and the games mattering and knowing when the next Sabres game is, which hasn't always been the case in recent years. Sabres games would just creep up on you. Oh, the Sabres are playing tonight, as opposed to the Sabres play in 2 nights. And in 2 nights, I'm going to have plans to be either, on my couch, or I'm going to get home from work so I can watch the Sabres, or I'm going to meet up meet up with my friends at the bar. And this is how I'm planning out my week and my work schedule and all kinds of things to watch the Sabres, because they're relevant, and win or lose, the games matter again. And it's not the most important thing, but when you lose that aspect of your fandom as an organization, when your fans don't even know what night you're playing on and care whether or not you win or lose. And in fact, got to a point, because they wanted Kevin Adams fired so badly, where I think a lot of fans were preferring the losses to pile up, because the losses felt like they could be more productive than the wins felt good. Then, those days are in the rearview mirror for now. Uh, let's hope, for Jarmo Kekalainen's sake, that he doesn't renew those feelings of apathy/anger.
And it's going to make the next few months a lot more enjoyable for Sabres fans. Going into the Olympic break, when the Sabres aren't playing for 3
The
weeks,
trade
you get to
deadline is going to
watch.
be fun.
Exactly. The trade
Let's see
deadline,
what
which
this
comes up
guy
after
does at the
that.
trade deadline for the first time.
Yeah, because if the Sabres were losing like they have, then that Olympic break is kind of like a break from the Sabres. You don't have to think about them or worry about them, and maybe it's not as much fun to watch Tage Thompson play for Team USA and Rasmus Dahlin and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in the Olympics. But if they're one of the contending teams and you're feeling good about your hockey club, then it's a little more fun to kind of watch what they do in the Olympics and hope they don't get hurt. And then the trade deadline is a lot more enjoyable when your team is a buyer, not a seller.
Jonah, what is your concern level for the Bills and their ability to survive Jacksonville and advance to the second round of the NFL playoffs?
Well, I think the concern has to be how good the Jaguars have looked. I say that wrong, don't I? Somebody accused me of that.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
Jaguars.
yeah. Well,
Lance
sorry about
Lysowski
that.
is also a Jaguar guy, I noticed during one of the news conferences this week.
Well, the Jaguars.
As is Carl Jones. Carl Jones is also a Jaguar guy.
Well, maybe we're all right and you're wrong. Have you ever heard of, we've never had an actual Jaguar pronounce its own name. We don't even know how they roar that.
That's right.
I also feel like it's a word that you could sort of say both ways and be correct, but some people are very added. The people that say Jaguar is wrong are zealots about that. And those of us that say Jaguar really don't care if you say Jaguar or Jaguar.
All right, I'm going to Merriam-Webster right now. I'm going to hit the pronunciation. Hopefully this comes through. Let me turn up my microphone. There are 2 pronunciations here. I don't know what we're going to get. Maybe we're going to get one of each, but I think my prediction is it's going to be Jaguar and Jaguar.
Can I say this too? Is maybe Jaguar in this category of words that we say with our Buffalo accent and it's correct colloquially? Colloquially.
All right, here we go. Oh, I have my mute on. Hang on. No, I don't. It's not doing it. Yeah, doesn't want to.
Yeah.
Speakers don't want to work. I think it's because I'm plugged all the different devices that I have plugged in for the podcast. It's not. I think Zoom also kind of takes over my speakers while we're
Well,
on.
anyways, the Jacksonville football team
Oh, here I'll
has
do it through my phone. Go ahead. I'll find it. Well, go ahead. Make your.
the Jacksonville football team has been maybe the best team in the NFL for several months now. 8 straight wins, number one scoring offense, number one scoring defense during that span. They've beaten good teams. They beat the Broncos. They beat the Chargers by a lot. They haven't always had the most difficult schedule, but they've taken care of business. Again, they're rolling. They have the right coach and quarterback combination and the right momentum going into the playoffs, which you cannot say that about the Bills, at least the momentum part of it. The way they were inconsistent throughout much of the season and the last month of the season. I do think the Bills are very, very capable of winning this game and wouldn't be surprised at all. And I'm not surprised that they're slight favorites in the game. I'd have more concerns about the Bills' ability to be consistent and play well enough to win 3 road games and make it to the Super Bowl. But any single one of these road games, I think the Bills, with their experience and their talent and Josh Allen, have the ability to win and the justification of being favored to win.
Jaguar.
Can you hear that? Okay.
Yeah, right.
All
That's
right.
how
Well,
you
that's
say
the
it.
first one. Here's the second pronunciation. Let's see what he pulls out.
Jaguar. Jaguar.
And that's what you
Yeah.
hear usually on the Jaguar automobile commercials. They go with the Jaguar because I think it's like when it went from Adidas to Adidas briefly. Do you remember that? However, there is a dialectical, especially British, and there's not a button to hit for this, in which it appears to say dialectical Jaguar. Dialectical, but it's not considered an official pronunciation.
How about jag off? Can we say that?
Well, let's see if Merriam-Webster will allow us to do that. No match found for that. Let's see if jack off maybe.
Elena Getzenberg from ESPN says that's incorrect. But you can't say that on television.
No. So there is, it is in, for those watching on YouTube, jack off is in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, but they don't allow.
Not hyphenated.
But I can't hit pronunciation on that. And the history and etymology of jack off is probably an alteration of jerk off, probably. Circa 1916 is the first known use of jack off.
Wow.
The verb is jacked off, jacking off, and jacks off. This is in the dictionary, so I'm allowed to say it. It's like when you'd get a curse word on a song and you could sing it in the car with your parents and be like, they said it on the radio. I can say it. All right. So speaking of profanities, Josh Allen has not won on the playoffs. He's getting a lot of criticism maybe not criticism, but a lot of weird stuff's being heaped on Josh Allen that because there is no Patrick Mahomes, no Joe Burrow, no Lamar Jackson, and MGM, BetMGM has posted this on social media for Rage Interaction, I think. No excuses for Josh Allen to not win the Super Bowl this year because all the tough quarterbacks are out of the field. And then we're seeing a lot of, again, I called it earlier in the show. I keep going back to it because I think it's the perfect description. The distant drumbeat of Sean McDermott is out or might be replaced by John Harbaugh. Rhetoric going on. Stephen A. Smith, Nick Wright, Colin Cowherd, Damon Amendolara, Mike Florio, even Adam Schefter heading into the Week 18 game against the Jets did a big board in the ESPN studio in which he went through the coaches who are safe and who they are and who are in trouble. And of Sean McDermott, he said he's probably safe. But if they lose in the first round, hey, all bets are off. I personally don't see it. Now, you'd have to know how Terry Pagula is thinking, or have another source within the Bills front office. And look, these are not necessarily sourced people. Adam Schefter, the exception, but the others, they're not people, they're insiders. Nick Wright, Amanda Lara, Stephen A. Smith, Florio, all these guys. These are national pundits. Colin Coward. These are guys who talk off the top of their head. And I do think that in a very vague way, in looking at the Bills situation of all these years with Josh Allen and reaching the AFC championship game just twice and not coming close to winning either of those games, not being able to win a road game, I get it that you would look at it and rationalize and be able to justify the concept of it's time to move on from Sean McDermott. Let's get somebody else in here to see what they can do with Josh Allen and unlock his greatness. So I understand that. But to me, the thing that is bemusing to me is that none of these people know the Bills, how the Bills are thinking or how Terry Pagula is thinking. And I tweeted it a couple of days ago, and I stand by it, that Terry Pagula could walk into a room and kick some of these guys square in the nuts, and they wouldn't even know who that guy is. But they're going to tell you what Terry Pagula might do, ought to do, or will do with Sean McDermott. So I don't know. It's a journalism discussion wrapped up in a discussion about Sean McDermott's future, or vice versa. I'm not sure. Jonah, where your thoughts on all these different things floating around?
I don't know if I can summarize it any better or differently than you just did. I mean, I don't think that there's any smoke to the fire about Sean McDermott's job being in jeopardy at all. I think it would take, I don't even know if a losing season or missing the playoffs once would put him on. It might put him on the hot seat for the following season, but I think it would probably take two miss the playoff seasons like Jim Harbaugh just had before the Bills would entertain a coaching change. I do think there's a disconnect there. You described there's a disconnect between the national media and the speculation and local media, local fans, and people that follow the Bills about who would possibly be scapegoated if the Bills don't meet their expectations this season. I don't think anybody's going to get fired. I actually don't even know if there's a coordinator or a prominent assistant coach that could even be the scapegoat in this scenario. But if you're listening to local radio and local Bills fans, I think there's a lot more frustration with Brandon Beane and the roster moves that he's made than there is with the coaching decisions that Sean McDermott has done this year. And I don't hear anybody in the national media wondering if the general manager's job is on the line in this playoff run, which, again, I don't think either one of them are going to be fired, nor do I think either one of them should be fired. But the people, Pro Football Talk, and the national writers that are speculating about the coaching job, I think, are missing what the people closer to the team might be seeing as the perilous positions, in the Bills hierarchy.
Yes, I would agree with that. Also, if a lot of people have noticed, it's interesting to have heard Sean McDermott when he talks about things about other teams and opponents lately, and he's done it well even during the regular season. I'm recalling him speaking wistfully about the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line, and I'm paraphrasing, but in the post-game news conference after the Eagles won that game, saying that's how you build championships, about how great that defensive line was that the Bills were up against that night. Talking about Jacoby Myers unsolicited twice. And I want to say unsolicited because he was not asked about Jacoby Myers either time. He mentioned him on Monday, making a huge difference at the trade deadline to unlocking Jacksonville's offense. And he did so again Wednesday, unsolicited. It was not a Jacoby Myers question. It was just a general question regarding just the Jaguars and what he thinks of the Jaguars. He also brought up their acquisition at the trade deadline of a cornerback. Also going back, I'm not going sequentially. He made it a point to bemoan that he had to use both of his starting cornerbacks in the game, or at least two of his top cornerbacks in the Week 18 game against the Jets because they didn't have the extra guy. That extra guy being Jamarcus Ingram, who was with the Houston Texans. He was cut after the Bills picked up Darius Slay off waivers. with that move that backfired mightily when Slay refused to report. So Sean McDermott, without criticizing Brandon Beane directly, has made it a point to let others know that he's working either a little shorthanded at times or other teams have things that he wishes he had. And I don't think that's by accident. And I don't think that we're just reading between, I'd have to go back and listen. I don't remember it as prominently. But I don't recall him talking about Trevor Lawrence unsolicited like that, or speaking like the fact that he would bring up Jacoby Myers twice in the span of 72 hours in news conferences. So anyways, but I think that also is maybe Sean standing up for himself, because he does take this heat out there nationally, and with people saying he's probably wants to, in a subtle way, raise his hand and be like, this is a team. I'm just the coach here. We have other people who, this is not Josh Allen versus Trevor Lawrence on Sunday. This isn't Josh Allen versus the field of quarterbacks. This is a team operation. And, we didn't upgrade at kicker. Why do other teams, now Sean McDermott's not said that, this is Tim Graham saying it, but why do other teams in the National Football League have these kickers that seem to come out of some lab that can just nail 65 and 70 yarders? Brandon Aubrey with the Cowboys. And of course the Jaguars have one of these guys. Meanwhile, Matt Prater, with bubble gum on his hip and, Scotch tape wrapped around his knee, is going to go out there and hopefully and he's their best option that they can have. Michael Badgley couldn't do it, but these teams find these guys. So anyways, but I think one of the reasons why Brandon Beane doesn't, to your point, Jonah, get as much criticism as McDermott is, because that's the coach. He's the guy that you see on the sidelines. Brandon Beane, yes, he's in the stadium on Sundays, but the camera isn't cutting to Brandon Beane after every decision that is made, or every third and short, or a fourth down, or the Bills going to go for it. If somebody does something great or does something poor, you don't see Brandon Beane on the sidelines, getting after so the coach is very much the face of an organization. But Brandon Beane's also a very nice guy to the media. And that is something that, is part of the relationships that you build. So are the national media guys going to be as critical on a guy that they might deal with on things like transactions? What are you thinking about the draft, free agent signings, all these types of things? The guys who, Brandon Beane's won the awards. He's won the Pro Football Writers Association awards for being the nicest guy in the business. He's won the Buffalo Bills awards. He's known for being super accessible. Any reporter can get Brandon Beane on the phone if you put in the request. It's one of the great things about Brandon Beane. And I think that there's a tendency to maybe be a little nicer to the guy who's good to you than it is to the guy who doesn't return your calls or just is unavailable. And that's not to say that I think that journalists will try to be as objective as they can, but it's human nature that you generally will shy away from being hypercritical or calling for openly talking about that person losing their job, as opposed to the person who doesn't return your call.
Yeah, and also teams that have made the playoffs and have double-digit win totals 7 years in a row don't fire their general managers. And that kind of success and consistent success is usually rewarded with contract extensions, not being on the hot seat. And this is where I think the issue is going with Sean McDermott. I think people are looking at the Bills like you look at other NFL teams in the past, where they hit the wall in the playoffs year after year, and Tony Dungy got moved out. A general manager changes coaches because he thinks that's what needs to be done. That's not the dynamic here in Buffalo, and that's not what we expect to happen. But if you look at the Bills from the perspective of covering another team or being in another city or looking at the past and how the NFL front offices have typically operated, you might see the potential for a random general manager to look at his team and say, we need to shake this up.
And one last point on this, unless you have more that you want to make or what I'm about to say triggers another thought. The John Harbaugh discussion is interesting to me because everybody, as soon as John Harbaugh was fired, people started looking at, well, where does he fit in? What would be the best team for him to go to? I believe there are 7 openings right now, but John Harbaugh at Bet Online. Bet Online has John Harbaugh 10-1 odds to be the Buffalo Bills' next coach. There are only 4 teams that have shorter odds than that. Miami, New York Giants, the Raiders, the Falcons. Let me read them back because I like to have parallel thought. I want to give all nicknames and not just all cities. Dolphins, Giants, Raiders, Falcons are the only teams that are considered more favorable on a betting scale than the Buffalo Bills, who have a head coach. They're going into the playoffs with a head coach. But people keep talking about John Harbaugh as a possibility for the Bills because why? Because he won a Super Bowl 15 years ago. Okay, I get it. Ray Lewis was his middle linebacker. Nobody's around. Joe Flacco was his quarterback. But the thing that I find interesting is that John Harbaugh was just fired from the Baltimore Ravens for not being able to maximize Lamar Jackson, for not having a culture or whatever it is that gets the best out of his star quarterback. So I guess people may think that John Harbaugh can come in with Sean McDermott's people and whatever's been built already and then take it to the next level. All right. But John Harbaugh also is fired because he's unable to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And guess what? John Harbaugh can't beat the Buffalo Bills. So what's the deal with John Harbaugh to the Bills? Why? Because they have an established quarterback and John Harbaugh is just that finishing polish that's going to win you a Super Bowl. I mean, that is going back a long, long ways just to find a finger quotes Super Bowl winning coach. I mean, that is ancient history. 2012, so 13 years ago, that happened. And let's also keep in mind what John Harbaugh has had. He hasn't just had a great quarterback. He's had a multiple-time rushing king, one of the greatest kickers in NFL history, an amazing tight end. He's had really good wide receivers, elite defensive players. So I get, John Harbaugh, he's won it, and and you're minted a champion forever when you win that Super Bowl. But I just don't know if this is just content to get you from now until games are played on Sunday. Black Monday needs to help generate some of your TV content or your podcasts or your tweets, but some of it doesn't add up. And if Terry Pagula does fire Sean McDermott for John Harbaugh, well, then now we can say, well, he runs his football team like his hockey team, because that's been the saving grace for Bills fans all this time is at least he leaves the Bills alone, right? Except for those, granted, there are Bills fans out there that want Bean and or McDermott gone and have for a long time because they want to turn the page and build and do what's next. But anyways, I don't recall Bills fans or people really talking about Belichick to the Bills. Belichick's pedigree is way better than Harbaugh's. Nobody was talking about Belichick to the Bills. They've replaced McDermott with Belichick. Now it's, you know what? It's time to move on from McDermott and hire John Harbaugh is farcical.
Yeah, and Terry Pagula has fired coaches of the Sabres and the Bills before, but he's generally leaned towards being reluctant to do that rather than being an impetuous owner that makes a quick change. And we know Terry Pagula regrets firing Lindy Ruff the first time and, didn't have good feelings about that coming out of that situation. And that was after seasons where the Sabres were missing the playoffs and really taking a downturn. The Bills are in the playoffs. The Bills could still go to the Super Bowl. And, I just don't think there's any scenario where Terry Pagula decides after this season to move on from Sean McDermott. I think he's a big fan of Sean McDermott as a person and a coach. And I think he would have difficulty making that move if the Bills were having a terrible losing season. I think
I
I
can
know what
think
you're
of
going to
one
say, and there's
scenario in
one
which he'd
reason,
do
and
it.
it's not going to happen. If Josh Allen,
Yeah.
if there's a situation like what seems to be going on with Lamar Jackson, that's not the case. If that were to happen in the future, that changes the dynamic. But without that in play, it's not happening.
Yeah. If Josh Allen would have to come out, well, he wouldn't have to do it publicly. It's not like I mean, if he said it publicly, that would create chaos and that would really force it. But if Josh Allen went to Terry Pagula and sat down and said, look, um, we need this. And if you don't move on from Sean McDermott, I'm going to demand a trade or something like that. Is that's as it stands now, based on everything I know, unless something's happened or until I learn otherwise, that's about what it would take. So
And Sean McDermott, his level of success that the Bills have had, is not a coach you fire. He's a coach you trade away for draft picks if something were to
right.
happen to,
So yeah,
facilitate a change. Like it's, and that's not happening either. But, uh, you know, the scenario where the Bills decide to make a coaching change to get better after this season is just, they're several years away from that. They're several bad seasons away from that.
of all the Bills fans that would be thrilled, and there's a segment, there's a vocal segment of fans who would be thrilled for Sean McDermott to lose his job as the Buffalo Bills head coach. There are people who would be more excited, and they would be the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Patriots. They would be more than happy to see Sean McDermott out of the division and let the Bills roll the dice on whoever's next. Because even if it's not a John Harbaugh, the flavor of the month, the coach that the can't miss coach like Adam Gase and Cliff Kingsbury and Chip Kelly, and I know that I go through this list all the time, but these guys, man, they're just all over the place. They cannot miss. And then of course they're out of the league quickly. There's a lot of failure out there.
I feel kind of ridiculous even talking about this. Um, After the Bills, a 12-5 season and still
Right.
considered maybe, one of the favorites in the AFC and the success they've had year after year. And then just being around and watching this team, the home games and weekly in the practices. It's a well-run program. This team likes their coach. They play for their coach. It just seems absurd. If I woke up, if the Bills lose Sunday night and we wake up Monday morning and you get that news, I'll be shocked. Absolutely shocked.
Same here. Same here. Yeah, it was more of a journalism discussion than it was, or just media, social media. I don't know. It's just, again, the distant drumbeat. Um, what's going on around the Big Four in basketball, Jonah? Let's start with UB. I mean, we don't have to do all four teams, but UB is still winning, and St. Bonaventure is doing its thing. What are your thoughts on the college basketball scene?
Well, UB, I was out there last weekend for the most recent home game. They're 13-2, 3-0 in the MAC. It's the best 15 game start they've had other than when they were 14-1 in 2019, last year under Nate Oates, and they were top 15 in the country at that point with that record. This team is not pushing into a top 25. They get one vote earlier in the season. They have a much weaker strength of schedule. According to one ranking I saw, bottom 5 or 6 in the entire country strength of schedule. And their max schedule has lined up to where they've played 3 of the worst teams in the league right away here. But they've won these games by double figures, and they're uh, taking care of business in those games. The schedule gets tougher now. They go to Ohio on Saturday, and that starts a stretch of 8 games where they play. They play some of these teams twice, but they play Ohio. They play Miami, who's undefeated. They play Akron, who might be the favorite in the league. They play Toledo, and they play UMass, which is new to the league and another solid team. So they're not going to, I think, go win 13 of their next 15 games and get to 26-4. But if they can get through this tougher stretch, 5 of the games are at home, which is good for them. If they can get through this tougher stretch with 4 or 5 wins, I'll be as impressed with that as I am with them winning 13 of the first 15 games.
What else going on? Anything else in your notebook that you want to unleash before we wrap things up here, Jonah?
St. Bonaventure has, a similarly good record and did beat UB in their head-to-head matchup earlier this year, but their season isn't trending as well. They've lost 2 A-10 games in a row. They didn't play too well the other night. And it's tougher for them, at 11-4 overall. It's tougher for them to make to win their league, I think, than it might be for UB to win its league. They have a little better chance at an at-large bid normally, but that's not going to happen this year. So, St. Bonaventure going through it a little bit. They've lost to two of the better teams in the A-10. And so that's, their schedule didn't work out as favorably early on in league play. I think they'll turn some things around and be competitive going into March. But being on that at-large bubble or being a favorite to contend in the A-10, it's not looking like it's that type of season for St. Bonaventure right now.
Are they the type of
And
team?
Canisius 7-8. That's one of their best records they've had in a number of years.
Back to St. Bonaventure real quick though. Are they the type of team that can get hot at tournament time? Are they built that way?
I think they're good. Just comparing them to other Bonaventure teams and the local talent, the way they played against UB, I think they're a good team with good players in the right mix. Frank Mitchell, a transfer they got from Minnesota, but he started his career at Canisius. He's one of the best rebounders in the country, and he's playing well for them. They're dealing with some injuries right now. I absolutely think that they could win the Atlantic 10 tournament, especially with Mark Schmidt as coach. But the way their season is going, their ability to have the record that puts them in that at-large bubble conversation or gets them a lock into the NIT, that's starting to fade away. It's starting to be a season where they're going to need to win the Atlantic 10 tournament or make it to the final in order to extend into the postseason.
Big high school rivalry game this weekend.
Yeah, tonight actually. Canisius at St. Joe's, two of the, I think, top 3 ranked teams in the Western New York large school rankings, and that's always an exciting atmosphere in either one of their gyms, but especially at St. Joe's, a little closer to the court where the fans sit.
What are the odds if you're just walking up, can you get a seat, or are these games sold out?
This game will probably sell out, and you'll probably need to get there at some point during the JV game to definitely get a seat, depending on who you are. Some people can get in, but yeah. St. Joe's has a nice gym and decent seating, but there's not a lot of seats. So it's kind of like a Damon game, it fills up quickly. Damon undefeated, and Damon's won 47 straight regular season games. They've only lost that one tournament game that you attended, and I was home prepping for my colonoscopy. In the last 2 seasons, they've won every single other game that they've played.
I got to get over there, check it out. Jonah, thanks for this. Thanks to everybody out there for listening, for watching, for supporting Tim Graham and friends. Please, as I asked earlier, Jonah's pointing at me.
I just want to mention one more game. The Buffalo Bandits, 3-1 on the season. They play tomorrow night in Rochester. That game is on Channel 4, WIVB, which is somewhat significant.
The commercials.
Yeah,
the game's
not a
on
lot
4.
of Bandits games get on network television or, basic network televisions. It's kind of a big deal that it's on Channel 4, lower on the dial. And also sort of an interesting game. Rochester Nighthawks were owned by Pagula ownership. They're now owned by the Seneca Nation. Connor Fields, who's an East Amherst native, is the reigning league MVP. Zed Williams from Cattaraugus territory has been traded to Rochester. So there's interesting storylines to watch in that game Saturday night on Channel 4. If you're not at the Sabres game or not watching the Sabres game.
There is not a local sports team Jonah doesn't know about. It's impressive. So please, everybody out there, give us a like, 5 stars, comment, subscribe, follow, whatever it is on your platform of choice. Hell, go on multiple platforms. Help a brother out.
Yeah.
But
make fake accounts and give us positive reviews.
Whatever it takes. Yeah, we're going to make a push here, and that's something that I've never done. I mean, from my days on terrestrial radio, this was always, I always said I was not going to hustle on my side hustle. This was my side non-hustle. But I have learned a couple of things about the business and that I've been apathetic towards or indifferent towards. And let's see what we can do. Let's try to make a push, but the push comes from the audience. And if you're listening, if this is something that you like, if this is something that you want, if you want it to continue or get bigger, your support is critical. And so I thank you in advance for that. And please let me know when you see me out and about. Beers are always on me because that's usually where you would see me out and about, except for the Real Rad Man at the mall. Can you drink at the mall? Jack Astor's is closed. Oh,
Not
there's
the Boulevard Mall.
There's the Mexican place where World of Beers used to be. Dave and Buster's. You can drink at a lot of places at the mall. Now that I think about it, Dave and
Wait,
Buster's. I'm sure PF Chang sells beers. Santora's is closed, I think, already. Anyways,
I wanted to ask you
we can brown bag it in the parking lot. I don't care.
if you have any wistful feelings about the Boulevard Mall closing and stores leaving and that
I
place going
didn't know it
away.
was still open. I thought it was closed for a long time. And so I see a headline in the Buffalo News today that Macy's is closing. And I thought, well, shit, I didn't know that that existed. What was still in there other than Macy's?
Penny's is still in there, Dick's is still in there, but Dick's is moving to a new location soon. Penny's is fighting and trying to stay, but I think at some point that's going to be the last. I also heard there's
Dick's
like a
has a
Chinese food
nearby,
spot
like,
that's still there.
it's like a palace. Have you seen, you've probably seen it. It's the big construction that's going up off
The
of the
House of Sport. I
990.
haven't seen it
Yeah.
actually.
It's
Yeah.
massive,
Yeah.
massive. There's some big, like 50-foot fencing that's going up. I don't know what they're going to
Mm.
do there. Softball diamond or something, maybe.
Yeah, I
It looks
think
like
right,
it's
right.
too high for golf, or it's not high enough for golf. But maybe it's like it's a green monster style left field fence. I don't know what they're doing, but anyways, it's massive.
Well, in bringing that up though, thinking about that, I'd like maybe to ask you, you could share with our listeners after we talked a little bit going into it, but after this final home game at Highmark Stadium and being there for
Oh,
that
we didn't even
and
talk
maybe being
about
down
that.
on the field a little bit at the end, what kind of reaction do you have for that? What kind of wistful feelings do you have about, no longer uh, having Bills games in that structure?
I'm not trying to be an asshole about it, but I don't have any feelings because it is not a great stadium. Yes, it's a place where a lot of things happened. And I think that if I were a fan, obviously I would feel that way about it. Being in the bowl as opposed to behind the glass of the press box. The press box was fine by NFL standards. And I'm sure it's going to be the name is still the same. It's going to be Highmark Stadium. It's just going to be across the street. And I was talking with Lance Lysowski of the Buffalo News about it um, a couple weeks ago. About we were talking about how we're going to try to cover, two guys who aren't from here, and the pull, the nostalgic pull, and it's like it's about the people, and all the people are going over there. You don't even have to go a different direction to the stadium. It's not like you're going to take a different route. You're just going to your drive is going to be the same. Maybe the parking lot where you set up your tailgate will be different, but it's going to be the same people, all the same names, all the same, and it's going to be nicer. So, and plus, that stadium is not exactly a edifice. What's the word I'm looking for? The visage of, like, it's not a striking silhouette. Like when you see just the outline of the stadium. Some stadiums have that. You see it. And this is just kind of like, again, I know I've said it a gazillion times. It's like a mid-American conference stadium when you're driving up to it. You need to actually be in it to see that it's the bowl and it's sunk down 50 feet into the shale and all these other things. But from the road, I mean, it looks no different than Kent State Stadium or Akron's Rubber Bowl. I mean, it's like it's a one deck with light stanchions hanging up, and there's just, I don't know. And it's just so, yeah, if I were inside in my seats and I was walking around the stadium a little bit and I ended up on the concourse maybe 15, 20 minutes before halftime, it was clogged to no end. I'm like, why do people do that? This was the logistical aspect of it sucked. It stunk. Walking through shortcuts through the M&T Club or the Jim Kelly Club, whatever they used to be, those areas on either side of the radio television press box, just the grease smell that's coming out of the ducts, it is an old stadium with not a lot of charm other than the memories of what you recall happening on that field or maybe with the person sitting next to you. So again, not to sound like a downer on it, but to me, it's just like, and I didn't see, there was some emotion from fans and workers and things like that. Um, but it was more like end of an era than we're going to miss this building. There were a lot of people looking at each other like, good friggin' riddance. And I'm talking about people who work there. Like, let's get out of here as quickly as possible. I mean, Jesus, I hope this is the last game.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good deal of charm to the stadium, especially the inner bowl area, the playing surface, the way the seats look. It harkens back to a different era of stadiums. I do wonder if there might come a time someday when new football stadiums are constructed to look a bit like the old stadiums, the way baseball got into that motif over the years, and that kind of started with Pilot Field in Buffalo. And I think there's another part of that charm is being able to drive up the road. Sean McDermott mentioned this and kind of look into the stadium and see what the inside of the stadium looks like because the new stadium and all the other new stadiums around the league don't allow for that. But also similar to you, I don't have the same nostalgic feelings about going to games and family connections that a lot of people have. I do think the fan experience is going to be largely the same next year, and if not better. And more is going to be the same than things are going to be different. But some things are going to be different, and I didn't feel as nostalgic about it going into the game, but I felt it more kind of in an empathic way, being there, seeing how much it meant to everybody else, hearing Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed and these former players talk about it, the memories it evoked. I think, like you said, an end of an era. I think the building closes a chapter in not just Bills history, but Buffalo and Western New York history, NFL history in a way that is melancholy and things like that. And the new stadium will be great, but it won't be the same. And there will be things that are lost. And some things like being able to put 80,000 people in the stands and, different nuances of that stadium and that type of stadium and that era is gone now and won't be recreated at the old stadium.
Yeah,
New
that's
stadium.
true. That's true. Maybe they should do a rock pile section where it is no seat backs. Just it's incredibly uncomfortable, an obstructed view. Like 150 seats in the what's called the rock pile section, and you can't see shit. You get rained on. Everybody else around you is covered, but you aren't. Or maybe even when it's nice out, they just pour rain. There's like a sprinkler system.
I do wish because the rock pile still exists as John B. Wiley Stadium, and it's different in a lot of ways, but it's still kind of there, the same footprint, and it's still a football stadium. And it would be nice if somehow, the Ralph could be preserved as a smaller football field area or something else to still preserve the history of it, even if it's no longer the area where the Buffalo Bills play their home game. But if it still could be kept in some way, a historical facade or something like that. But I don't believe that's going to happen.
Well, they're keeping the administration building. So that building that is a bit back from the tunnel entrance, that is going to stay. So that is a front, a facade, but that's like you can't see that from the road or anything. You'd have to drive up to it to see it. And plus, it's not like it was iconic or emblematic of the stadium in any way. But yeah, that is staying. I imagine they probably do something like they did in Pittsburgh, where there's a marker where Franco Harris scooped up the Immaculate Reception. Maybe they'll do something like that with, this is where the 50-yard line was. Maybe a memorial or a monument or something like that, or put Ralph's statue that move. I'm sure they already have plans for Ralph's. I don't know it, but something like put the Ralph statue on what was the 50-yard line of the old stadium. That'd be pretty cool. There's all kinds of things they can do. Oh, by the
And
way, I want to say for the record that we talked last week about um, like people who should come back to lead the charge. And I mentioned it. It was after the game on Sunday. We're at the bar. We're having a couple of beers. And it finally dawned on me who I think would have been the coolest guy to bring back to lead the charge. Now we came up with if Marv couldn't make it, which he couldn't. He's 100 years old. You didn't want him out there in that weather. He did a video message at halftime. We talked about Mary Wilson would have been a good one. What were some of the other ones that weren't? Did we have any
I
on the
recommended
show
Mark
last week?
Poloncarz.
Mark Poloncarz, you jokingly said. I said Kathy Hochul just to make Joe Lazito upset. Kevin Everett. I think Kevin Everett walking out of the tunnel and doing the last leading of the charge would have been really fucking cool. Anyways, different. but you can't go wrong. Again, that's not a criticism of the two guys who did it, Steve Tasker and Thurman Thomas. Those are perfectly fine choices. All right, Jonah,
I like
thanks
Steve
for
Tasker a
what?
lot because not only did Steve Tasker play for the Bills, but he stayed here and become a West Her New Yorker and, been such a part of the local culture that it wasn't really in a broadcaster. It wasn't really just a former Bills player. It was almost like a Bills fan. And I think some of the alumni players fall into that category, but it feels like Steve Tasker, maybe more than the others, does that.
Yeah, some of there were 18 alumni on the field at halftime for the game. Among them, Brad Lamb, who played 7 or 8 games in the NFL, Christian Gaddis, who I think played 2 games for the Bills, Ashton Yabodi, mixed in with Joe DeLamielleure and Jim Kelly and John Fina and Brian Moorman. It was an eclectic group.
Can I say one more thing? I wish there were more Bills alumni there. If it could have been, a very, very large number, or, as many as they could get, that would have seemed appropriate. And also, and I understand why it played out this way, but it was cool to see Tre'Davious White and Reed Ferguson and Spencer Brown and the few players that lingered on the field to watch that really well done tribute video with the Goo Goo Dolls song Iris playing, and all the fans, every single fan staying in their seat in that moment, shared together with the players and the fans. It was disappointing the way it worked out that most of the other players, Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, and a lot of other players were rushed off the field. I understand why they did it. They had worries that the fans were going to rush
safety.
the field for safety. Yes.
Yeah, they thought the fans were going to storm the field.
But nobody did. I don't even think a fan tried and got stopped. The fans were very well behaved. So it was like if they could have known that was how it was going to play out, it would have been great to have more of the players and more of the prominent players stay on the field for that moment and have a lot of these alumni players on the field for that and doing it together. You could have had Jim Kelly and Josh Allen hugging each other while all this was going on. It would have been nice if you can't know that going into it, but if you did know that the fans weren't going to rush the field, that post-game celebration could have played out differently.
Excellent point. Thanks to everybody for listening and for watching Tim Graham and Friends. I'll do the call for action one more time. Please subscribe, follow, like, give us the rating, comment, all those things that you can do to show your support. Really helpful as we decide what we're going to do with Tim Graham and Friends and how big we're going to make it. It's up to you. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you want. Tell us what you don't want. Maybe you want costumes. I don't know. Let us know. Thank you again for your support and for watching and listening to Tim Graham and Friends.
Thank you.